Now, everybody's heard of Daniel Boone. He's a legend in these mountains, and he has so many stories and so many adventures. But this story I'm going to share with you is not in any of his history books or in his life's journals. This is a story that you can find online, and a few videos has been made on it. So I've researched it, and this is my take on it. And as the story goes, that he'd come across some hairy beast over 10 foot tall in these mountains and had to shoot it. But he didn't know what to call it. Now we call it a Bigfoot these days, but in them days, he just called it a Yahoo. Now, old Daniel Boone, he was born in 1734, died in 1820, lived to be a ripe old age of 86 years old, of all the things he's done and went through in these mountains. But I'll tell you one thing, some say this story's true, some say it's not, but I'll let you be the judge. He just didn't tell many people this story. He didn't want to be ridiculed. He told it to his close friends when he got up in his days and his age. But you don't know who Daniel Boone is? Well, let me refresh your memory just for a few minutes, ones that don't know, before we get into this story. He was the one that made the Wilderness Road famous. He built it with his axemen back here out of Virginia, East Tennessee, up into Kentucky. Cumberland Gap. This is the actual gap. Blazed a trail through here. So much history gone through these places. And here's the settlements of Kentucky back in that day, of what he blazed a trail into. But he's not the first here. These are the Native American lands, the Shawnee and the Cherokee, and a lot of other little bands of Native Americans. And they used this way before any white man ever come in this country. This was their trails. They followed them after the wild game of the buffalo for years. And back in them days, this was the wilderness. This was the frontier. It was kill or be killed. Now, a lot of Native Americans was friends, but a lot of them wasn't. They resented the white man being in here, and the British turned them against us. Now, he had 10 children, him and Rebecca, but all this time of settling this wilderness, he lost a brother and 2 sons settling this state of Kentucky. So much history. The things he's done. And here's just a few. Old Daniel. There you have it. A true American legend. And it's hard to believe all he'd been through. He lived to be a ripe old age of 86 years old. Now this old story Daniel told, like I said, it's not in any book. Not any history book. It's just something he kept to his friends because he didn't want to be ridiculed. But is it true or is it false? Now this old story, don't know if it's what time of year it was, but he was hunting with his son when this happened. Don't know which son it was. He had 6 sons and 4 daughters, but 2 sons had died. Now this story starts out in Boonesboro. Here's Boonesboro, the fort, back in the old days when they built it. And they had a lot of trouble with the Native Americans. They was always besieging them, trying to burn them out, and they fought constantly. These little war parties in here trying to run them out, but they never did run them out. But this went on for years here at Boonesboro, till after the Revolutionary War died down, so did this. But the story starts out one morning. This happened before the turn of the 1800s. They went out of the fort one day looking to check their horses, what few horses they had, and they noticed that some Native Americans, the Shawnee, had run off with their horses. They seen a bunch of tracks. They stole their horses, what few they had. So he took his son. The rest of the people stayed at the fort, I reckon, the story goes. And they followed the creek down, followed the tracks down to Licking River, and followed it down to the Ohio River, where Cincinnati is today, in that star. And they was catching up on them, but they come to find out they come up on hundreds of Native American Indians there. They couldn't do nothing about that. So they thought they'd just slowly head their way back to the house. They couldn't do nothing about that. And they would do some hunting. Well, they done some hunting here, but they split up. One on one side of the ridge and one on the other side of the ridge. And so if one shot, the other one would come to the other one. So they done some good serious hunting here. But he heard his son shoot across on the other side of the ridge. So he went running towards him quick as he could across the ridge to see what he'd got. Maybe he'd got something good. But when he got within range over the ridge, he could see some big creature was over his son, was fighting with him, throwing him to the ground, picking him up and throwing him down, the story goes. And his son was just laying there unconscious. Well, he's afraid he was killing his son, so he's trying to draw a bead on him. Well, about that time, that creature noticed him and didn't like him being there, was growling and everything. So he was moving around so much, but he tried his best. He was such a far distance, he drawed a good bead on it and fired. And when he fired, it just fell over to the ground. He didn't know what it was, so he went up there. And he was more worried about his son. He checked his son, and son was unconscious, but he finally got his son to come to. Wasn't no bones broken or anything, but he was scared to death. And he told him that he'd shot at this beast that was coming after him. He shot it and it didn't do no good. He tried to run away. And when he tried to run away, this beast just overtook him in 2 or 3 steps and grabbed him, took his gun and slammed it against a tree and broke it, and then picked him up, started slamming him to the ground. And then he just said he just lost consciousness. He don't know what happened after that till his dad woke him up here. But after he seen that his son was okay and everything, they went to checking out this creature. Daniel had shot him in the head. He'd shot him in the head. He's moving around so much he's lucky he even got a shot at him, he said. The story goes. Well, they got to checking. This creature was real hairy. And they measured with the rifle, because the rifle was 5 foot long, these Kentucky long rifles they's using. And it was two rifles length and just a little bit over, so he figured it's about 10.5 foot tall. They didn't know what it was, but his son had hit it right in the chest. And the story goes, too, that they checked his chest there, that he didn't have normal ribs like a man does. You know, like different separated ribs, like the whole rib cage was solid bone. So nothing could penetrate the rib cage. So that might be why people shoot Bigfoot and it don't do nothing to them. But I don't know. Is this story true or is it false? But anyway, they know they'd shot a couple of times and the Native Americans was close by that they might notice them and come and get them, as many of them as there was. So they had to get out of there as quick as they could. So they come on back. They just left it lay there, they said. That's all I know. I have no way. That's what the story goes. Now this old story, is this true or is this false? Now Daniel didn't share this with many people. It's not in no history books. He didn't want to be ridiculed. He just shared it with friends in his later in life. And he didn't know what to call it. Didn't know what it was. Didn't know what to call it. But he liked to read a lot of this Gulliver's Travels book back in the day. That's what it always said back in the history books. He did like his stories. And he just named it out of a fictional character out of Gulliver's Travels. Called it a Yahoo. That's all I can tell you on that story right there. But as time went on, he'd talk to some of his Native American friends that he was friends with, and they told him that way back that their elders had told them that there used to be creatures like this in these forests and these woods, but they'd just about extinct, died off. But they was here at one time. And the Native Americans knowed of them. But they all lived as one, they said. But they just died off. So I can't tell you if this story is true or not, but it sure is a good story, ain't it? But the Cherokee had a name for these animals, these creatures. They call it Teluskaloo. If I'm pronouncing it right, the sloping giant. That's what the Cherokee name was for these Bigfoot. So, I hope you enjoyed this little story. I can't tell you if it's true or not, but all I can just tell you the story. It's an awful good story, though, but I can't see that old Daniel, out of all he's been through, why he would make up a lie like this. He didn't have to lie about anything. He had so many adventures and so much stuff to tell. Now, like I said, you can find this story on the internet or even other videos on YouTube about it. So you make up your own mind. So I thought I'd just share that with you. So much in these mountains, yet we don't know nothing about. Is it true or is it not? So I hope you enjoyed this. God bless. Take care, and I'll see you next time.